Hi, I'm your iFit guide, Mick Davie, and I hope you're feeling good because we're about to walk through 1,000 years of history. So feel free to warm up on your machine as we climb these stairs. I've got something quite amazing to show you up here. Now, Istanbul is a city like no other. It has withstood the rise and fall of history's most important empires. And if there's one building that defines this city, it's this colossus over here, the Hagia Sophia. It's a marvel of architecture that has reigned for 1,500 years as one of the most important religious structures in Turkey and the Middle East. I've been given special access to film inside, which is a rare privilege these days. We'll delve deep inside the inner sanctum to marvel at what was the largest dome on Earth for 1,000 years. And we'll see some truly astounding artwork. I'll also tell you the myths and the legends, including one about a weeping angel, that fill this building with life. By the way, up here, this is a bit of a secret spot, and it's where locals come to catch one of the best views in Istanbul of one of the greatest houses of worship in both the Christian and the Muslim worlds. All right, let's get going. We're going to head into the heart of the Hagia Sophia together. Since its construction in the 6th century, the Hagia Sophia has been revered first by Christians, then by Muslims, as one of the most important buildings of their faiths. It looks incredible, even today. But imagine what it felt like to be a weary pilgrim visiting this city some 1,500 years ago and to lay eyes on the Hagia Sophia. It was by far the biggest and most spectacular cathedral on Earth. It must have been life-changing. Back then, Istanbul was known as Constantinople, and the Hagia Sophia was the epicenter of life here. Built by the Byzantine Emperor Justinian in the early 6th century, it was constructed on the grandest possible scale. A devout Christian, Justinian apparently spared no expense for his monument to God. He spent more than 145 tons in gold. That's nearly $9 billion US, which was thought to be the lion's share of his treasury. So the first thing you see when you enter is this incredible mosaic high above the archway. Now, on the left is the Emperor Justinian, who's showing a model of the Hagia Sophia to Jesus Christ, and it represents Justinian's great devotion to Christianity. On the right over here is Emperor Constantine, who is showing Christ a model of the city of Constantinople, which is now Istanbul, which he made the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire and the center of Christianity throughout the world. The two emperors both look sort of quite humble in this image. Their heads are bowed before Christ and his mother Mary, but I always find it sort of amusing that if you turn around and if you look up here behind me, there's a great big mirror reflecting the mosaic as you walk out of the church. And that's to remind people who've been praying inside of who actually built this church and who paid for it. Let's keep going inside. So inside the church, there is this section called the Narthex, and this is an area that was designed to help prepare Christian worshippers to enter the spiritual realm ahead. And every time I come here, I'm sort of overwhelmed by the scale of this area. And there are, in fact, 9 different doorways or entrances into the church, each for a different class of society. This door here is the main door. It's called the imperial door, and only the Ottoman sultans and the emperors of the Byzantine Empire were allowed to enter through this magnificent doorway. And before I go in, I'm just going to take off my shoes. Oh, okay. Now, before we go into the inner sanctum, just take a look over here. This is one of my favorite little stories to tell in the Hagia Sophia. You can see these depressions in the ground. Now, those depressions were caused or made by the imperial soldiers who would stand here on guard, waiting for the nobles, the sultans, and the emperors to walk through. And every time a high-ranking person walked through this gate, they would stamp their salute, and over the centuries, they wore these depressions in the ground. Let's head in. Now, on the day the Hagia Sophia was first inaugurated in 537 AD, Emperor Justinian sacrificed 1,000 oxen, 6,000 sheep, 600 stags, and some 10,000 birds before giving 30,000 bushels of wheat to the poor. He then came here by chariot, and as he entered through the door, he extended his arms towards heaven and called out, "Glory to God, who has deemed me worthy of fulfilling such a work. O Solomon," he said, "I have surpassed thee." And that's because Solomon's temple was the largest in the world until Hagia Sophia. And you can see why Justinian was so impressed. This is the grand central sanctuary. And I remember the first time I walked in here and looked up, and I was almost overwhelmed by the scale and the raw beauty of this place. And I remember looking up at the grand dome and thinking, it really does look as though it's floating on air, which is exactly what the architects intended when they built it. And speaking of architecture, Justinian embraced the church's simple rectangular shape, taken originally from the Roman basilica design to demonstrate his Christian piety. But he also wanted something spectacular to symbolize his imperial power. And that's why he built the grand signature dome, a dome that would rival the great Pantheon of Rome. While the builder's original intent was to create a perfectly round dome, what they built was in fact an ellipse that would be revered by Christians for centuries. The dome reaches 180 feet in height and spans 100 feet across, and it's tall enough to shelter the Statue of Liberty from base to torch with room to spare. So the Hagia Sophia was a smashing success for Justinian, but unfortunately that didn't last long. In the 550s AD, a series of 3 earthquakes caused a major collapse of the Eastern Arch and the Great Central Dome. The whole thing came crashing down, which must have been absolutely terrifying. Once again, Justinian spared no expense. He had the church restored, and his new architect, Isidorus the Younger, actually raised the central dome 20 feet higher than it was originally positioned. He also installed 40 windows at the dome base to reduce the weight of the structure, and this simple adjustment to the original design has allowed the dome to remain intact to this day. So this is a part of the Hagia Sophia I like to call the belly button. The real name is Omphalion, which means navel of the earth. Take a look at this. As you can see, the navel consists of 12 main marble and granite circles of different colours, red, green, pink, and some believe the 12 large circles represent the 12 apostles of Christ. Others count the 32 circles of different sizes and believe the design is celestially inspired, a great central circle representing the sun at the center of the universe, surrounded by planets and stars. And it was here, smack bang in the middle of the church, that new Byzantine emperors were crowned. Apparently, the newly crowned emperor would sit atop a magnificent throne placed within the main circle, the center of the universe, and the empress would watch the proceedings from the balcony way up there in the back. So follow me over here. I want to show you one of my favorite corners of the building. We just have to duck up here. It's actually blocked off to the public at the moment, but we'll just take a peek over this barricade. Over in that corner, there's a structure called the Weeping Column, and the story goes like this. During the construction of the Hagia Sophia, the chief architect was visited by an angel, and the architect asked the angel to stay inside the building and protect it until he came back. He had to go away on urgent business. But the architect never set foot in the building again, and the angel got stuck at the base of the column, holding the building up. Since then, it has been rumored that the column performs miracles, and to activate the miracle, you put your thumb into a hole at the base of the column, you turn your thumb, and if it comes out wet, it's said that you've been blessed with the tears of the angel and your wishes will come true. So the Hagia Sophia stood for centuries as a colossal monument to Christendom. Then in the 15th century, this iconic church was forever changed. On the 29th of May, 1453, Constantinople fell to the attacking Ottoman forces. On that day, Sultan Mehmed the Conqueror entered the city and came straight to the Hagia Sophia, where it said he dismounted at the door of the church, bent down to take a handful of earth, which he then sprinkled over his turban as an act of humility before God. The Sultan then entered the church and performed the Friday prayer and sermon inside these very walls. And this action marked the official conversion of the Hagia Sophia from a church into an Islamic mosque. Now, the conversion from a church into a mosque came with many architectural changes, and perhaps the most notable was the addition of 4 massive minarets, which you will have seen outside. These tall, slender towers contain balconies from which the call to prayer is delivered 5 times a day, and a golden crescent was mounted on the top of the central dome, under which I'm standing at the moment. And as I mentioned earlier, if you look up into the heart of the central dome, you'll see Arabic script in the crown. And this is a verse from the Quran, which was painted over a huge mural of Christ when the church became a mosque. Now, when the church was converted to Islam, most of all of the surviving Christian iconography was either covered in plaster or removed to shift the spiritual focus away from Mary and Jesus to Allah and the Prophet. Over here, you can see high up in these corners, you can see paintings of 2 seraphim angels. Now, the face of the angel on the left is clearly visible, but the face of the angel on the right, up here, has actually been painted over. That's because when Muslims came here to pray, they faced the sacred Muslim capital of Mecca, which is in that direction. And the Christian angel's face on this side, on this side of the building was covered so as not to distract the Muslim worshippers. During a major renovation of the Hagia Sophia between 1847 and 1849, the Ottoman Sultan also added 8 calligraphic medallions, which you can see up here on the walls. Now, 3 of the 8 medallions, they're nearly 25 feet in diameter, list the names of the early founders of Islam. Now, this is the part of the building which once housed the Christian altar where church services were performed. That's up here. It was said that the altar and the apse behind it was encrusted with gold and jewels and was decorated with over $20 million worth of silver. Legend has it that when the city was attacked by Mehmet the Conqueror and his Ottoman troops in 1543, that a fleet of Venetian ships carried away the altar into the Sea of Marmara, just a few miles away from here, and a storm struck and sunk the fleet, including the ship carrying the altar, and that ever since, the area of the sea where the ship was sunk has remained perfectly calm, completely immune to storms and waves and other rough weather. Interestingly, during Christian times, the altar was a place of sanctuary. If you were touching it, you could not be arrested or removed by force. Fugitives are reported to have grabbed onto the edge of the altar and clung to it for dear life when the authorities came to arrest them. When the church became a mosque, the altar was placed by a raised platform called a mihrab. And this is the area here which is used by imams to lead the Muslim faithful during prayer services. And over here, just behind me, there's another structure which is called the minbar. This is called the minbar, and it was added a little later to this niche, oriented in the exact direction of Mecca, so that the Muslim congregation would be rightly pointed to the holy city during daily prayers. And if you look closely, this semicircular niche back here is ornamented with tiles and verses from the Quran. This amazing place isn't all ancient history. The Hagia Sophia has played a key role in several really famous feature films, including Inferno and From Russia with Love. But most recently, Academy Award-winning Best Feature film Argo made an indelible impact on the building. While scouting the location, the Argo director of photography, Rodrigo Prieto, asked the church authorities if he could use his own warm incandescent bulbs, replacing the building's fluorescent lights. Now, the Hagia Sophia officials were certain the filmmaker's lights couldn't handle it, but they gave the cinematographer their blessing, and Prieto and his team swapped out about 4,000 bulbs, and it worked. The Argo lights are still the lights in the fixtures that you see today and that illuminate the interior of the mosque. All right, that's about it for inside the Hagia Sophia. Let's head outside, get some fresh air. So congratulations, you've almost completed the walk. Feel free to take a drink of water and to warm down. But before we end, the story of the Hagia Sophia isn't quite over. For the first 1,000 years of its life, the Hagia Sophia served as a church. Then, when the Ottomans conquered Constantinople, they converted it into a mosque, as we know, and it stayed that way from 1453 until 1934, when the Turkish Republic declared that the building would become a museum and would allow observance of both faiths represented here. Christians and Muslims shared equally in this magnificent house of worship. Just a few months ago, however, Turkey's President Erdogan declared that Hagia Sophia would become solely a mosque again, drawing rebukes from across the international Christian community, from the Kremlin to the Vatican. And for me, it's humbling to realize that the pages of history continue to turn, and a new chapter has just begun. Thank you for coming along with me on this journey. I'm your iFit guide, Mick Davie, and I hope you'll join me again for another walk soon.